Hello and welcome to NewsClick. We're going to discuss today the recent Security Council resolution that has taken place on Syria, by which it appears that the peace process has restarted. We have with us Professor Aijaz Ahmad. Aijaz, good to have you with us.
Thank you.
We did discuss the Turkey-Syria Russian issue some time back. Well, this seems to be a new development, and for the first time after December we have at least the formal start of a peace process in which all the major international powers have agreed to. Do you think this is a radical change, or do you think this is, for the time being, something that we have to really watch to see what happens?
Well, at that time, I remember when we discussed this matter, I had actually brought up the point that there are a lot of rumors saying that this kind of peace process will be starting sometime in February or March, and that by June they're expecting a real ceasefire. After the Security Council resolution, what becomes clearer is that the process has actually got speeded up compared to what was expected, which probably means that there is a greater agreement between the United States and Russia than was obtained until even a month ago.
You had actually said that a part of the reason of what the Turkish attempt to stop Russia was because there was also an attempt on the ground to grab as much space as they could, as much geographically, as much of the regions as they could, and so on. So it was really a positional battle before the ceasefire. That's how you read the situation.
And actually, my feeling is that since we last talked, and I suggested that they have come to see that they cannot capture territory. So the sooner the ceasefire comes, the better it is for them, because that means that even if you delay it by another 2 weeks, the Syrian army will have captured more. So the point is to have a ceasefire before, to prevent the Syrian army from capturing. They're on a roll. They're capturing territory every day.
Do you think that the Western powers, who are the ones who really have been talking about regime change, Bashar Al-Assad must go, and from 2012 to now have really stalled the peace process? This document is not significantly different from what was agreed in 2012, and it's taken really 3.5 years for them to move to a virtually a similar position. Do you think this is in that sense a real game changer? Or do you think that this is really sort of the West being led screaming and kicking to the table?
In my view, what the Americans thought, or at least the Obama administration and his group in the administration thought, that they could actually overthrow the Assad government against all assessments of the Pentagon and all that. But the real game changer is what has happened since the Russians came in. So that about a month ago, both Kerry and Obama started talking from both sides of their mouths. Obama, about 2 weeks ago, said, "We are not about regime change. We and our allies." Allies? Which allies? Does that include Saudi Arabia and Turkey? Which of the allies are not for regime change? 3 or 4 days ago, again, he says Syria cannot be stabilized without Assad leaving. Now, this is an interesting formulation. Not that he must go, but cannot be stabilized. So you see these shifts. Kerry says one thing in Moscow, another thing at the Security Council. In Moscow, he said Assad is not an issue. In the Security Council, again, he said something about Assad. My sense is that Americans have been forced to retreat, and as you said, screaming and kicking. Yes, they could have had this agreement, and it's the same thing with the, it's a repeat of the Iran nuclear deal. They could have had this deal in 2006. The deal that eventually came. Absolutely. They spent 6 years trying to achieve more and finally settled for what was offered to them in 2006.
So this is essentially, therefore, a rollback to the 2012 position from which we have restarted the issues. Of course, a lot of blood has been shed, huge displacements that have taken place. So all that has happened, and a further growth of sectarian forces in this region, both in Syria and Iraq.
Saudi attack in Yemen is actually part of that whole Saudi plot to change the balance of force in the region, and they also seem to be coming to their senses after their debacle in Yemen.
Yes, that's an interesting issue, though Saudis officially haven't changed their position as yet. There is supposedly a peace process in Yemen as well. Again, no ceasefire is taking place. The bombings are continuing.
Yes, they have done an enormous amount of damage from the air, and they have captured territory there. But what has also happened is that the border between Yemen and Saudi Arabia has become fluid.
And also,
Houthis are now on Saudi soil.
And also, Al-Qaeda has taken much more territory there as a consequence of this war.
That's right.
And even Aden, they have even killed the governor.
That's right. Saudis have facilitated the growth of Al-Qaeda in Yemen.
Yes.
So, when you add all of this up, then what seems to me is that that the Americans just have had to concede, and in a certain sense accepting defeat for the Obama administration's plans. Of course, now recently you must have seen Seymour Hersh's piece, an extraordinary piece about the split in the American intelligence at the highest level between Pentagon and CIA.
Seymour Hersh's piece in the London Review of Books.
Right.
It's interesting he's now publishing in London Review of Books because it doesn't appear that the US major outlets are willing
Exactly. From New Yorker, the shift is to London Review of Books. Yes. And again, he quotes people, unnamed sources, but that is Hersh's style. It doesn't mean that that the argument is thin.
No, in fact, if you read this piece, this is what perhaps NewsClick we have been discussing.
We have all been saying. But there is one point there that when you get right down to saying that the Joint Chiefs of Staff have undermined Obama's policies in this way and that way and that way. So what you get is that the kind of analysis that we have been presenting, saying that there are facts we shall find out later, now have been corroborated with actual factual information.
But the interesting part is Seymour Hersh's piece, in fact, argues that Obama and neocons had not much of a difference, but the military had. Now, I don't know how far that's true, or whether Obama really did not have the courage of his convictions, which is to say that this neocon policies in Syria, regime change, etc., is not going to work, because it didn't appear that he should have had as much of a stake in this, and in Iran as well, he didn't seem to have as much of a stake as the neocons did. So, was it a three-way split, a two-way split?
It's hard to tell, but it's hard to tell.
I don't know, Michael Flynn is the DIA guy who was the one who has also been quoted by Seymour Hersh. He has said we made a mistake, we should have backed the rebels much earlier. So when we could have had made a change in Syria, so he was actually taking a more hawkish position, at least in his...
Right, it's not a straight Pentagon and them. He names Dempsey in that's right. But anyway, the point nevertheless is that Americans have not at any point actually accepted all the problems that had accumulated on the ground until the Russians just came in and clarified things for them.
Do you think amongst the Western powers, the fact that IS has captured so much ground, and the fact that Saudi Arabia and Turkey have been playing a rather dangerous game in this part of the region, has actually also made them a little more cautious, particularly after the Paris attack?
Well, the remarkable fact is that this the British and the French coming into the fight after the Paris attacks, that Paris attacks are being used as the occasion to do it. I think again that is what they need for domestic consumption, right? But the immediate objective was again to capture territory for these, their rebels, whatever you call them. I think the objective was that, but after the Paris attacks, they could sell it much more easily at home.
So you do see this as essentially a change, a significant shift in Syria, and that this will lead to a real peace process starting there. Of course, the course will be rocky. It's not going to be easy. We don't know. Yeah. But also the strategic balance has shifted, and that is going to determine finally the peace process.
That's right. That is what I certainly would say. One last thing that I would say, though, that Russia took a very decisive step, but a very risky step, because if they win or prevent them, the others, Turkey and Saudi Arabia, from winning, then Turkey and Saudi Arabia will unleash terrorists on Russian territory.
The Caucasus Guard, that's a
risk that they have taken, and I think that calculation is that was going to happen anyway.
Last point that I would like you to talk about, that there has been this argument that Turkey wants this new Ottoman sphere, that they are wanting to fill up the space. Do you think that's likely, or with this Russian decisive shift? And this is really back to 1990, after the first war in Iraq, where the US had said, now Russia is not going to intervene in Middle East. We have a free hand. This is now changed. Do you think that Turkey will also read the writing on the wall, or do you think Turkey's new Ottoman dreams continue, particularly Erdogan's?
Yeah, my sense is that they certainly had the objective of actually capturing territory in the border regions, both in Iraq and Syria, and annex them. Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah, that whole region, and annex them into Turkey, saying these are Turkish territories which are conceded, and so on. And the second objective, I think, was to destroy the potentials of the Kurds, Syrian Kurds. In both those, they have failed. They'll have to accept, I think, that they have failed, that no territory is going to be conceded to them as a peace process. They could only do it through sheer military force if there was no resistance for them. So that is now gone. The Kurds are actually in a much stronger position now than they were before all this conflagration started. So their strategic defeat is actually very considerable. Now, these are people who are now claiming the Turkish nationalism even more hysterically than the worst of the Kemalists did. And that is combined with all this jihadi zeal and Erdogan's. Erdogan is in a position where he either has to go forward or has corruption cases against him or whatever. So all kinds of factors are, I think, going to combine in a situation where he'll be thrashing around to look for just disruption of the Russians, the animosity. So my sense is that his irrationalism will not be controlled by this. What form it will take, we don't know.
Of course, we have the immediate provocation near Mosul, what he has done. Yeah. And both Iraq has protested. Now even the Americans have told him to pull back. So those are the developing, shall we say, tensions that are there and new fault lines which might come about.
Yeah, and obviously in Mosul and others, in that whole region, oil is also an issue. He wanted that oil regions.
And also
Yeah.
The Barzani group has been selling oil to him.
Sure, sure.
IS was selling oil through him.
Yeah, yeah.
So all this.
So he
is a
wanted
part
the
of
territory for himself.
Part of that.
But that, I think, has been prevented. But he'll react.
So that's still the joker in the pack.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you, Aijaz. This has been a good
Thank
discussion.
you.
And we
Thank
hope
you.
to
It has
follow
been a
this
great
up.
pleasure. Yeah.
Follow this up later. We'll keep our eye on it in NewsClick, and we'll have Professor Aijaz Ahmad join us in these discussions. Thank you very much.
Thank you.